The gunshot shattered the crystal chandelier above Marina's head. Glass rained down like diamonds as she dropped behind the mahogany desk, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 seconds. That was all the time she had before the second shooter would round the corner. Her hand flew to the drawer she'd memorized during her first week as a spy inside the Kuznetsov empire. Third, from the top, left side. The cold steel of the pistol met her palm just as heavy footsteps thundered across the marble floor. Marina rolled left, squeezed the trigger twice, and watched the assassin crumple. Hit that hype button right now if you're ready for this wild mafia romance. Marina rolled left, squeezed the trigger twice, and watched the assassin crumple. Her training had taken over, muscle memory from countless hours at the agency firing range. But this wasn't a drill. This was the Kuznetsov penthouse. And she'd just killed a man to protect the very criminals she was supposed to be exposing. "Marina!" Anton's voice cut through the chaos, raw, with something between fear and fury. She didn't have time to answer. The third attacker came through the window in an explosion of glass and gunfire. Marina moved on instinct, her body a weapon itself as she closed the distance. 3 strikes, throat, solar plexus, knee, and he went down choking. She grabbed his weapon, checked the corridor, and only then allowed herself to breathe. But that moment of crisis was still 3 months away. Marina's story had begun much more quietly, in a sterile government office that smelled of old coffee and broken promises. "You understand what we're asking of you." Director Petrov had slid the folder across his desk with 2 fingers, as if the contents might contaminate him. The Kuznetsov twins are not ordinary criminals. They're ghosts wrapped in expensive suits. We've lost 2 agents already trying to penetrate their organization. Marina had opened the folder, studying the photographs clipped inside. 2 men, identical down to the last detail, yet somehow different in ways the camera couldn't quite capture. Artem Kuznetsov stared at the lens with eyes like winter ice, his expression revealing nothing. Anton's photo caught him mid-laugh at some charity function, but there was something predatory in that smile, something that suggested the laughter could turn to violence in a heartbeat. "They run everything from gun running to political corruption," Petrov continued, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign on his wall. "But they're clever. Every business they touch appears legitimate on paper. Kuznetsov Industries owns half the commercial real estate in the city, along with shipping companies, restaurants, even a chain of hospitals. The blood money is laundered so thoroughly, it comes out cleaner than a saint's conscience." "What's the entry point?" Marina had asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety coiling in her stomach. "They're hiring. Executive assistant position, direct support to both brothers. Your cover identity is solid. Marina Sokolova, business degree from St. Petersburg, 3 years at a consulting firm in Moscow that we've backdated into existence. You'll wear a wire when possible, copy files, identify their network. 6 months, maybe 8. Then we extract you and dismantle their empire." That had been the plan. Simple, clean, professional. Marina should have known better. Her interview had been scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at Kuznetsov Tower, a gleaming monolith of steel and glass that dominated the skyline like a middle finger to the honest world below. Security had been extreme. Metal detectors, background checks, an escort who never smiled, and whose jacket bulged with a concealed weapon. The elevator had risen so smoothly, Marina barely felt the movement, just the increasing pressure in her ears as floor numbers climbed. The penthouse reception area was a study in controlled luxury. Everything whispered money, but it was the kind of wealth that didn't need to shout. A minimalist furniture that probably cost more than a car. art on the walls that might have been originals, a view of the city that made it look small and conquerable. Miss Sokolova. The receptionist had perfect teeth and dead eyes. Mr. Kuznetsov, we'll see you now. Which Mr. Kuznetsov? Marina had wondered. But the answer came as soon as she entered the office. Artem sat behind a desk of black marble and chrome, his suit charcoal gray and perfectly tailored. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't smile, barely acknowledged her existence beyond a slight gesture toward the chair opposite him. Sit. Not quite a command, but not a request either. Marina sat, keeping her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. Every detail mattered in moments like these. Show too much confidence, and you seemed arrogant. You showed too little, and you seemed weak. She'd practiced this balance in front of mirrors, with agency psychologists, in her nightmares. Your resume is impressive. Artem's eyes hadn't left her face since she entered. Perhaps too impressive for an assistant position. Why do you want this job, Miss Sokolova? The answer had been rehearsed 100 times. I'm ambitious, Mr. Kuznetsov. I've worked for companies where my talents were wasted on people who couldn't recognize potential. I've researched your organization. You and your brother didn't build this empire by accepting mediocrity. I want to work for people who demand excellence. Flattery. Artem leaned back in his chair. Do you know what I do to people who lie to me, Miss Sokolova? Marina's pulse spiked, but she held his gaze. I imagine it's unpleasant. But I'm not lying. Check my references. Test my skills. I can handle whatever you require. For the first time, something flickered in Artem's expression. Not quite approval, but interest maybe. He opened his mouth to respond, but the door burst open behind Marina. Artem, we need to... The voice stopped abruptly. Oh, interview day. I forgot. Marina turned to see Anton Kuznetsov, and despite their identical features, the difference was immediately apparent. Where Artem was stillness, Anton was motion. Where Artem was ice, Anton was fire, barely controlled. He wore his suit jacket open, his tie loosened, and he moved through the room, like he owned not just the space, but the air itself. Anton. Artem's voice carried a warning. This is Miss Sokolova. She's applying for the assistant position. Is she now? Anton circled around to perch on the edge of his brother's desk, studying Marina with unconcealed curiosity. What do you think, brother? Does she have the stomach for our work? That remains to be seen. Anton grinned, and Marina understood in that moment why witnesses described him as charming and terrifying in equal measure. Tell me, Miss Sokolova, have you ever done anything truly dangerous? The question hung in the air between them. Marina knew this was a test, but she couldn't determine the right answer. Deny it and seem boring. Admit it and reveal too much. I once told a police officer his parking ticket was unjustified, she said finally, in Moscow, during winter. He didn't find my argument persuasive. Anton laughed, genuine and sudden. I like her. Artem, hire her. It's not that simple. Sure it is. Anton stood, extending his hand to Marina. You're hired. Start Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late, or my brother will brood about it for weeks. Marina shook his hand, noting the calluses that suggested he did more than sign papers, and the strength in his grip that could have been threatening, but somehow wasn't. Thank you, Mr. Kuznetsov. Anton, if we're going to be working together, let's skip the formalities. He released her hand and headed for the door, pausing at the threshold. Oh, and Miss Sokolova, welcome to the family. Try not to betray us. We take that sort of thing personally. The door closed behind him, leaving Marina alone with Artem once more. "Ignore my brother's dramatics," Artem said, though his expression suggested he agreed with every word. "But understand this clearly. Everyone who enters our world makes a choice. Loyalty or destruction. There is no middle ground. I'll ruin you if you betray me, Miss Sokolova. Not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. Do we understand each other?" Marina met his ice-chip eyes and nodded. "Perfectly, Mr. Kuznetsov. Then we'll see you Monday." She left the tower with her cover intact and her hands trembling. In the car, she activated the encrypted phone Director Petrov had given her and sent a single message. "I'm in." What she didn't send was the creeping sense that she just made a mistake, far larger than she could comprehend. Monday arrived wrapped in rain and morning darkness. Marina entered Kuznetsov Tower at 7:45, allowing herself the buffer of 15 minutes to navigate security and locate her new office. When the receptionist from Friday, her name badge read Svetlana, handed over a security card, a company phone, and a tablet, already loaded with her schedule. "Your office is on the executive floor, 3 doors down from the main suite," Svetlana said, with mechanical efficiency. "Mr. Artem expects his coffee at 8 precisely. Black, no sugar. Mr. Anton takes his whenever he wanders in, usually around 9. Double espresso, 1 sugar. The kitchen is stocked. Your access codes are on the tablet." Marina absorbed this information, while her mind cataloged escape routes and security camera placements. Her office turned out to be larger than her actual apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that probably cost more than she'd earned in the past year of government work. She made Artem's coffee at 7:58, and delivered it at precisely 8, and found him already working through a stack of documents that would have broken a lesser person's spirit. "Miss Sokolova." He accepted the coffee without looking up. "Familiarize yourself with these files. I need analysis by noon." The files contained information on shipping routes, customs documentation, and freight manifests. To anyone else, they would have seemed legitimate. But Marina had been trained to spot the patterns, the gaps in timing, the ports known for lax inspection, the shell companies that existed only on paper. This was smuggling operation documentation, she realized. Artem was testing whether she could see what lay beneath the surface. She spent 4 hours analyzing every detail, making notes, cross-referencing data. At 11:55, she delivered her report to Artem's desk. He read it in silence, his face revealing nothing. Then he looked up at her, with something that might have been respect. "You see clearly, Miss Sokolova. That's either very valuable or very dangerous. Time will tell which." He set aside her report. "From now on, you will attend all strategy meetings. Take notes, but more importantly, observe. I want your insights on the people in those rooms." "Understood." "And, Miss Sokolova," Artem's voice stopped her at the door. "The cameras in your office are for security, not surveillance. But they're there nonetheless. Remember that loyalty works both ways." Marina nodded and left, her skin prickling with the awareness of being watched. She returned to her office and began the delicate work of appearing productive while actually mapping the organization's structure. Every name mentioned, every meeting scheduled, every document that crossed her desk became data for her real employers. Anton appeared at her door around 2 in the afternoon, holding what looked like architectural plans. "Marina, perfect. I need your opinion on something completely outside your job description." He spread the plans across her desk, without asking permission. "We're renovating the 4th floor. My brother wants efficient and soulless. I want something that doesn't make employees contemplate jumping out windows. Which design works better?" Marina studied the plans, genuinely surprised by the question. One design was indeed purely functional. Maximum space utilization, minimum aesthetic consideration. The other incorporated natural light, collaborative spaces, even a meditation room. This one, she said, pointing to Anton's version, when productivity drops when people feel like corporate drones. The investment in morale pays for itself in reduced turnover and increased loyalty. Anton's smile was triumphant. Exactly what I told him. Maybe he'll listen to you. He started to roll up the plans, then paused. You settling in okay? I know the first week can be intense. I'm managing. Good, because it gets worse. He said it cheerfully, like he was promising her ice cream instead of escalating pressure. We're having a family dinner Friday night. Artem insists you attend. Consider it part of your job. Family dinner. Don't look so terrified. It's mostly just us and a few key people. No blood rituals or secret handshakes, probably. He winked and left her office, whistling something that might have been opera. Then Marina immediately sent an encrypted message to Petrov. Invitation to Inner Circle. Friday. His response came 3 hours later. Accept. Document everything. Be careful. The week passed in a blur of legitimate work, mixed with criminal enterprise so smoothly integrated that Marina found herself almost forgetting the distinction. She sat in on meetings where Anton charmed potential business partners, while Artem outlined terms that would have made a loan shark blush. She reviewed contracts that hid money laundering in carefully constructed legal language. She witnessed the twins navigate a dispute between two subsidiary companies with the kind of ruthless efficiency that left no doubt about who held real power. And through it all, she gathered intelligence. Names, dates, financial transfers, and everything Director Petrov needed to build his case. Friday evening arrived with unexpected snow, turning the city into something almost beautiful. Marina dressed carefully, professional but not formal, understated but not plain. The dinner was being held at the twins' private residence, a converted industrial building in what used to be the warehouse district, before gentrification had made it fashionable. A car picked her up at 7. The driver didn't speak during the 20-minute journey, but Marina caught him watching her in the rearview mirror, evaluating, judging. Everyone in the Kuznetsov orbit seemed to be constantly assessing threats and opportunities. The building's exterior was deliberately nondescript, but inside was a different world. Exposed brick and steel beams combined with museum-quality art and furniture that belonged in design magazines. The space was open and flowing, yet somehow still felt intimate. Artem greeted her at the entrance, and for the first time, she saw him without a suit jacket, just shirt sleeves and a vest that suggested he'd come from somewhere more formal. Miss Sokolova, thank you for coming. His courtesy felt genuine, which was somehow more unsettling than his usual coldness. Let me introduce you to our guests. The gathering was smaller than she'd expected, perhaps a dozen people, all of whom radiated the same dangerous competence she'd come to associate with the Kuznetsov organization. Artem made introductions. A shipping company executive who probably moved more than just legal cargo. A lawyer whose specialty was making problems disappear. A restaurateur whose establishments definitely weren't just about food. Anton found her during drinks, pressing a glass of wine into her hand. Surviving? He asked. Is that the goal? Just survival? For most people, yes. He clinked his glass against hers. But I don't think you're most people, Marina. You're too observant, too composed. It makes me curious about what you're really thinking behind those careful eyes. Marina's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice level. I'm thinking that this wine is exceptional, and this company is fascinating. Diplomatic. Anton laughed. My brother chose well. Come on, dinner's starting. The meal was elaborate. Course after course of food that represented someone's genuine artistry. Marina found herself seated between a woman named Katya, who managed their entertainment businesses, and a man called Victor, whose actual role remained deliberately vague. The conversation flowed around her, sometimes in Russian, sometimes in English, occasionally in languages she didn't recognize. But what struck Marina most was watching Artem and Anton interact. In the office, their differences seemed like opposition. Here, she saw how they complemented each other. When Artem's explanations grew too technical, Anton translated them into charm and personality. When Anton's enthusiasm threatened to reveal too much, Artem's careful control reined him back. They were two parts of a single, formidable entity. Near midnight, as guests began departing, Artem approached Marina where she stood by the windows, looking out at the snow-covered city. Thank you for coming tonight, he said quietly. It matters that our people see you as part of this. Trust is currency in our world. I understand. Do you? He turned to face her directly. What do you see when you look at us, Miss Sokolova? Criminals? Businessmen? Something else? It was a dangerous question, one that could reveal too much about her true thoughts. But Marina had learned that sometimes the truth, carefully edited, worked better than lies. I see two men who built something powerful in a world that doesn't forgive weakness. I see intelligence and strategy and the kind of loyalty that most people only pretend to value. And yes, I see the darkness too. But we all make choices about what we're willing to accept. Artem studied her for a long moment. You're either very wise or very naive, and I haven't determined which. But I meant what I said during your interview. Loyalty or destruction, Miss Sokolova. Keep that in mind. He walked away, leaving Marina alone with her reflection in the window, and the weight of her deception pressing down like the snow accumulating on the streets below. She'd been inside the organization for exactly 1 week, and already she could feel the mission changing shape around her, becoming something more complex and dangerous than anyone at the agency had anticipated. In her apartment that night, Marina typed her report for Director Petrov, documenting names and connections and the subtle web of criminality she was beginning to map. But she found herself deleting certain observations. The way Anton had ensured an older woman at dinner received the chair with the best cushioning for her back. The moment Artem had quietly written a substantial check for an employee's medical bills. The humanity that complicated the simple narrative of good versus evil. She told herself it didn't matter. They were criminals. Her job was clear. But as Marina finally fell asleep at 3 in the morning, she dreamed not of bringing down the Kuznetsov empire, but of Artem's warning delivered in his ice-chip voice. I'll ruin you if you betray me. The truly terrifying part was that she was beginning to believe she might deserve it. The moment Marina knew she was compromised came 3 months into her assignment, during a strategy meeting that should have been routine. She sat in her usual position at the conference table, tablet in hand, recording notes that would later become intelligence for Director Petrov. Artem was presenting analysis on a territorial dispute with the Volkov family, another crime organization that controlled the city's eastern districts. His voice was measured and precise as always, laying out options with the kind of clinical detachment that suggested human lives were just variables in an equation. But Anton kept glancing at Marina, and something in those looks made her skin prickle with awareness that had nothing to do with her mission. The Volkovs are overextending, Artem concluded, pointing to markers on the digital map projected across the wall. They've moved into shipping without understanding the infrastructure required. We could absorb their operations within 6 months if we're patient. Or we could negotiate, Anton countered, his usual enthusiasm tempered with something sharper. Not everything requires conquest, brother. Sometimes partnership is more profitable. Partnership requires trust. The Volkovs have none. Neither do we, yet here we are running a successful enterprise. Anton's grin was sharp. Marina, what do you think? Every eye in the room turned to her. This was new. Being directly consulted on strategic matters that ventured beyond analysis into actual decision-making. Marina felt the weight of it, the test hidden in the question. I think, she said carefully, that the Volkovs' weakness is opportunity, but their desperation is also danger. Desperate people make unpredictable choices. If you push them into a corner, they might lash out in ways that cost more than their territory is worth. But if you offer them a lifeline with strings attached, you gain control without bloodshed. Silence filled the room for 3 heartbeats. Then Artem nodded slowly. Interesting perspective. Victor, set up a meeting with Dmitry Volkov. Neutral ground. We'll explore Miss Sokolova's suggestion. The meeting continued, but Marina barely heard the rest of it. She just advised on criminal strategy. Not simply observed or documented. Actually participated. The line she'd been carefully maintaining had blurred, and she wasn't sure exactly when it had happened. After the meeting, Artem asked her to stay behind. You have good instincts, he said once they were alone. Better than people who've been in this world for years. It makes me wonder where you developed them. Marina's heart rate spiked, but her voice remained steady. Good instincts are valuable anywhere. Business, crime, government. The principles are the same. Understand leverage, manage risk, know when to push and when to wait. Indeed. Artem moved to the window, his back to her. My brother is fascinated by you. He tries to hide it, but I know him too well. Be careful, Miss Sokolova. Fascination can lead to complications. And you, Mr. Kuznetsov? Are you fascinated? The question escaped before Marina could stop it. Too bold and too revealing. She watched Artem's shoulders tense, saw him weigh his response. I'm cautious, he said finally, still not turning. Caution keeps me alive. But yes, you're intriguing, which is precisely why you're dangerous. He dismissed her then, but Marina left the conference room, with her hands shaking and her mind racing. She was losing objectivity. Worse, she was beginning to care about the distinction between Artem's cold calculation and the vulnerability she sometimes glimpsed beneath it, or the way Anton's recklessness masked a fierce protectiveness toward the people he considered his. That evening, Anton appeared at her apartment door with Chinese takeout and an uninvited smile. How did you get my address? Marina asked, though she already knew the answer. Please. I knew your address before you interviewed. He pushed past her into the modest space she'd rented specifically for its lack of character. Nice place. Very temporary. Like you're not planning to stay long. Marina's blood went cold, but Anton was already unpacking containers of food, apparently oblivious to the bomb he'd just dropped. I brought kung pao chicken and those little dumpling things you liked at the restaurant last week, he continued. Also, I need advice about something personal, and if I ask my brother, he'll lecture me for an hour about responsibility and consequences. Anton, there's this woman. He interrupted her protest, handing her a plate. She's smart, beautiful, completely wrong for me in every possible way, and I can't stop thinking about her. Do I pursue it knowing it's probably a disaster? Or do I walk away before anyone gets hurt? Marina stared at him, trying to determine if this was some elaborate trap. Are you talking about someone specific? Very specific. His eyes met hers with unusual seriousness. I'm not subtle, Marina. My brother thinks I'm reckless, and he's right. But I know what I feel. And I feel something when I'm around you that I haven't felt in years. Like maybe there's more to life than the empire we've built. The confession hung between them like smoke from a fired gun. Marina knew she should shut this down immediately. Maintain professional distance, protect her cover. But instead she found herself saying, "That woman you're talking about, she's hiding things. Important things. Things that could destroy whatever you think you feel." Everyone hides things. Anton moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. I hide the fact that sometimes I hate what we've become. My brother hides the fact that he's desperately lonely behind all that control. You hide, well, whatever it is you're hiding. But hiding doesn't make feelings less real. Anton, this is a terrible idea, I know. But I'm asking anyway. Have dinner with me tomorrow. Somewhere that's not about business or the organization or anything except two people trying to figure out if there's something real here. Marina should have said no. Every instinct trained into her by the agency screamed to refuse. But she looked at Anton's face, saw the genuine hope there beneath the bravado, and made a choice that would change everything. One dinner, she heard herself say. But this doesn't change anything about work. Anton's smile could have lit the city. We'll see. He left shortly after, taking his food with him and leaving Marina alone with the growing certainty that she just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She reached for her encrypted phone to report this development to Petrov, then stopped. What would she even say? That she was potentially compromising her mission by developing actual feelings for one of her targets. Instead, she poured herself a drink and stared at the files spread across her dining table. Months of carefully gathered intelligence about the Kuznetsov organization. Names, bank accounts, shipping routes, shell companies. Everything needed to build a case that would destroy the twins and everyone associated with them, including her, if they ever discovered the truth. The dinner with Anton happened at a small restaurant, in a neighborhood Marina didn't recognize, far from the usual haunts of the Kuznetsov organization. No bodyguards, no business associates, just Anton in casual clothes looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. I wanted somewhere we wouldn't be watched, he explained, pulling out her chair. Where we could just be people, instead of roles we play. The meal passed in conversation that ranged from favorite books to childhood memories to philosophical debates about loyalty and choice. Anton talked about growing up with Artem, how they'd survived their father's brutality by becoming indispensable to his organization, then eventually taking it over when the old man's violence became more liability than asset. We didn't choose this life initially, Anton said quietly. It chose us, but we made it ours, transformed it from our father's crude empire into something more sophisticated. That probably doesn't make it better, morally, but it matters to me that we're not him. Marina found herself sharing truths she'd never intended to reveal. Not specifics about her mission, but real memories from her childhood. Her father, who'd been a police officer, killed in the line of duty. Her determination to make the world safer, even if it meant walking through darkness. You're not what I expected, Anton said as they walked through the quiet streets afterward. When you interviewed, I thought you were just another ambitious candidate. But you're more than that. You see the world clearly, all its shades of gray, and you haven't let it make you cynical. Maybe I'm just better at hiding it, No. He stopped walking, turning to face her under a streetlight. I know hiding, Marina. I'm an expert at it. This is something else. This is someone trying to hold on to hope despite evidence that hope is foolish. Then he kissed her, and Marina let him, knowing it was wrong on every possible level, but unable to make herself care in that moment. His hands were gentle, his mouth warm, and for just a few seconds she allowed herself to forget about missions and deception and consequences. When they pulled apart, Anton's expression was equal parts wonder and concern. "This is real, isn't it?" he asked. "Not just me being an idiot. You feel it too." Marina wanted to lie. She should have lied, but instead she nodded. "That terrifies me," she admitted. "Good. Means you're paying attention." He smiled, but it was sadder than his usual grins. "Whatever happens, Marina, whatever you're running from or hiding or afraid of, I want you to know that this was real for me. Tonight. This moment. Remember that." He left her at her door with one more kiss and a promise to see her at work Monday. Marina went inside and immediately broke down, sliding to the floor with her back against the door and her face in her hands. She'd compromised herself completely. Not because of poor training or bad luck, but because she'd made an active choice to betray her mission for a feeling she couldn't even properly define. But it got worse. 2 days later, Artem requested a private meeting in his office. Marina arrived with her usual composure, but something in his expression told her this wouldn't be routine. "Close the door," he said without preamble. "We need to discuss something delicate." Marina did as instructed, her mind racing through possibilities. Had he discovered her real identity? Did he know about her dinner with Anton? "My brother is in love with you," Artem said bluntly. "He thinks he's being subtle, but he's never been subtle about anything in his life. And before you deny it, I saw you two night before last. I have people who watch people I care about, and Anton is the only person I care about more than this organization." The confession stunned Marina into silence. Artem continued, his voice controlled but strained. "What complicates this situation is that I find myself in similar territory, which is ridiculous and unprofessional and potentially catastrophic for the careful balance Anton and I have maintained for years. But there it is. Truth, blunt and inconvenient. Mr. Kuznetsov, let me finish." He held up a hand. "I'm not my brother. I don't do spontaneous dinners or romantic gestures. I analyze and calculate and control, but none of that changes the fact that you've become important to me in ways I didn't anticipate and don't particularly appreciate. You're intelligent, composed, and you see clearly enough to understand what we are without the illusions most people maintain. That's rare." Marina felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. Both twins. This was spiraling beyond anything she could have predicted or prepared for. "I don't know what you want me to say," she managed. "I want you to understand the situation clearly." Artem stood, moving to the window with his hands clasped behind his back. "My brother and I have never competed over a woman before. Our unity is what makes us powerful. If you create division between us, it could destroy everything we've built. So I'm asking you to make a choice. Anton or me. Or neither, if that's what you prefer. But decide soon, before this damages something that can't be repaired." He dismissed her without another word, leaving Marina to return to her office on legs that felt boneless. She made it to her desk before the full weight of it crashed over her. Both Kuznetsov twins had just confessed feelings for her. The two men she was actively betraying, gathering evidence against, planning to help destroy. And the worst part, The absolutely unforgivable part was that she had feelings for both of them too. Artem's hidden vulnerability, the loneliness he masked with control, Anton's fierce passion, the hope he refused to surrender despite the darkness of their world. Different men, different approaches, but both somehow essential, in ways that made no logical sense. Marina spent the next week in a fog of confusion and guilt. She avoided both twins as much as possible, buried herself in work, and sent increasingly sparse reports to Director Petrov. When he finally demanded a meeting, she met him in a safe house across the city. "You've gone quiet," Petrov said, lighting his ever-present cigarette. "I don't like quiet. Quiet usually means problems." "I have enough evidence to move forward," Marina replied, sliding a drive across the table. "Financial records, shipping manifests, communications with offshore accounts. Everything you need for indictments." "Good. We'll start extraction procedures." "I need more time." Petrov's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "There's a deeper network. Political connections I'm just starting to map. Give me another month and I can give you, not just the Kuznetsovs, but the entire corruption web they're connected to." It was a lie. A desperate, transparent lie. But Petrov studied her for a long moment, and then nodded. "1 month. Then you're out, Marina. Don't make me regret this." She left the safe house knowing she'd just bought herself 30 days to figure out what she was doing. 30 days to decide between duty and something she couldn't quite name but knew was important. The decision was taken out of her hands 2 weeks later. The attack came during a routine business meeting at a hotel conference room. Marina had accompanied the twins to a negotiation with a shipping company CEO, sitting quietly in the corner taking notes as Artem outlined terms, and Anton provided charismatic reinforcement. Then the windows exploded inward, and masked men poured through with automatic weapons. Marina's training took over before conscious thought. She dropped, rolled, came up with the backup weapon she'd started carrying after her first month. 2 shots, 2 attackers down. And she saw Anton diving behind the overturned conference table, saw Artem moving with surprising speed toward the emergency exit. But there were too many attackers, and Marina realized with cold certainty that this was an assassination attempt, professional and coordinated. The Volkov family, or perhaps one of the other organizations that wanted to claim Kuznetsov territory. A gunman rounded on Anton while he was reloading. Marina didn't think, just moved. She put herself between the attacker and Anton, fired 3 times, and watched the man collapse. Then she felt the impact in her shoulder, a burning bloom of pain that meant she'd been hit. Anton caught her as she stumbled, his face a mask of fear and fury. "Marina!" "I'm fine," she managed, though blood was soaking through her blouse. "Get out. Both of you get out." Artem appeared beside them, his own weapon drawn, laying down covering fire. "This way. Now." They made it to the emergency stairs through a combination of Marina's training, Artem's precision, and Anton's aggressive assault. In the car speeding away from the hotel, Anton pressed his jacket against Marina's wound, while Artem made rapid-fire calls to mobilize their security forces. "How did you learn to shoot like that?" Anton demanded, his hands shaking as he tried to stop the bleeding. "You took down 4 men like you were special forces." Marina's vision was starting to blur from blood loss, but she understood the danger in his question. Her cover was unraveling. "Later," she whispered. "Questions later." She passed out before hearing Artem's response, before seeing the look the twins exchanged over her unconscious body. A look that meant everything had changed, and nothing would ever be simple again. When Marina woke up 12 hours later in a private medical facility, both twins were in her room, Artem sat in a chair by the window, his expression unreadable. Anton stood beside her bed, holding her uninjured hand with a grip that suggested he'd been holding it for hours. "You're awake," Anton said, relief flooding his voice. "Thank God. You scared the hell out of us." Marina tried to sit up, gasped at the pain in her shoulder. "The attackers, dead or captured," Artem said flatly. "Volkov family. Dmitri decided aggression was preferable to negotiation. He's learning the error of that choice as we speak." There was something cold in his tone that suggested Dmitri Volkov's education would be permanent and final. "But that's not what we need to discuss," Artem continued, standing and moving closer. "We need to discuss how our executive assistant has combat training, equivalent to a military operative. How she moves like someone who's spent years learning to kill. How she protected my brother with the kind of split-second decision-making that comes from extensive field experience." Marina's heart sank. This was it. The moment of discovery. "Who are you really?" Artem's voice was quiet, but sharp as broken glass. "And don't insult us with more lies. We've earned better than that." Marina looked between them, Artem's cold fury and Anton's wounded confusion, and knew she was out of options. The mission was over. Her career was over. Possibly her life was over, depending on how they decided to handle betrayal. "My real name is Marina Volkov," she said quietly. "I'm an intelligence agent. I was sent to infiltrate your organization, gather evidence, and help build a case for your arrest and prosecution." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Anton released her hand and stepped back as if she'd burned him. Artem's expression became absolutely glacial. "Everything you said, everything you made us feel, all of it was lies." Anton's voice cracked on the last word. "No." Marina struggled to sit up despite the pain, needing them to understand. The mission was real. The assignment was real. But what I felt, what I feel for both of you, that's real too. I didn't expect it. I tried to fight it. But somewhere between the lies and the mission, I fell in love with both of you, and I can't complete what I was sent here to do. Artem laughed, a sound without humor. "You expect us to believe that? You, who've proven yourself an expert in deception? I don't expect anything, but it's the truth." Marina met his eyes steadily. "I have all the evidence needed to destroy your organization. Bank accounts, shipping routes, communications. Everything Director Petrov needs. But I haven't turned it over because doing so would mean destroying you, and I can't do that anymore." "So what now?" Anton asked bitterly. "You're confessing because you got caught, or because you actually care?" "Both." Marina's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. "I got caught because I saved your life. I saved your life because I care more about you than I do about my mission. I'm a terrible agent and a worse person. But I'm telling you the truth now. Finally, the only truth that matters." Artem pulled a gun from his jacket, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, and pointed it at Marina's head. "You made me a promise during your interview," he said, his voice empty of emotion. "Loyalty or destruction? You chose destruction, so now I keep my promise. I'll ruin you for betraying me." Marina didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I know, I deserve it. But before you do, know that I love you. Both of you. That's not tactical. That's not part of any plan. It's just true." Anton's hand covered Artem's, gently lowering the weapon. "Wait. Wait for what? She betrayed us. She was sent to destroy everything we've built. This is what we do to traitors, Anton. You know the rules. Rules we made up. Rules we can change. Anton's voice was strained but determined. Marina saved my life tonight. She chose us over her mission. That has to count for something. It counts for confusion, sentiment, weakness. But Artem hadn't raised the gun again. Marina watched the twins face each other, years of unity cracking under the pressure of impossible choices. "What do you want to do?" Artem finally asked his brother. "I want to find a way where nobody has to die, where maybe somehow this insane situation turns into something that makes sense." Anton turned to Marina. "You said you have all the evidence, everything they need to destroy us. Where is it?" "On encrypted drives, hidden in my apartment. Director Petrov thinks I'm gathering more information, but I've been stalling for weeks because I couldn't bring myself to finish the mission." "Give us the drives," Artem said. "All of them. Every copy, every backup. Then we'll discuss what happens next." It was a test, Marina understood. Proof that her confession was genuine. She nodded slowly. "My apartment. I'll give you everything. But you should know, Petrov will come looking eventually. He'll send someone else. This doesn't end cleanly for any of us. Let me worry about Petrov," Artem said coldly. "You worry about convincing me that you deserve to keep breathing." They moved her to a safe house after she was medically cleared, a converted loft in the industrial district that probably cost more than Marina had earned in her entire career. Guards rotated outside, ostensibly for her protection, but actually to keep her contained. She'd surrendered the encrypted drives as promised, watched Artem personally destroy them in a fire that consumed months of evidence in her entire career. Anton visited daily, bringing food and careful conversation. Artem came less frequently, but when he did, he asked questions. Detailed questions about her training, her background, her real history. Testing for lies, searching for truth in the wreckage of her deception. "My father was a police officer," Marina told him during one of these interrogations. "He was killed investigating organized crime when I was 12. I joined the intelligence service to finish what he started, to make the world safer from people like, well, people like you. And now," Artem's voice gave nothing away, "now I don't know what I believe anymore. You're criminals. You run illegal operations. You've hurt people. But you're also more complicated than I expected. More human. And I can't reconcile the mission I was given with the people I've come to know. That's called moral compromise. It's what happens when ideology meets reality. Is that what happened to you? You started with ideology and ended up here." Artem smiled thinly. "Something like that. Our father taught us that the world is predators and prey. We chose not to be prey. The rest follows naturally." "It doesn't have to," Marina said quietly. "You could choose differently. Use your power for something other than exploitation." Interesting theory. From the woman who betrayed us. I betrayed my agency too. I'm an equal opportunity traitor. Marina met his eyes. "The question is what happens now? You could kill me, probably should, by your code, or you could use me. I know how intelligence agencies work, how they think, that's valuable. Or we could trust you, which would be insane." But Artem was considering it, she could see. "Anton wants to believe you. He's always been more optimistic. I'm less convinced." "What would convince you?" "Nothing. Trust can't be rebuilt once shattered." Artem stood to leave. "But necessity makes strange partnerships. We'll see." He left her alone with her thoughts and the creeping certainty that her future was being decided in conversations she wasn't part of. Either the twins would kill her, or they'd use her, or, impossibly, they'd find some way to move forward that didn't end in destruction. The answer came 2 weeks after the attack, when both twins appeared at the safe house together. "We have a proposition," Artem said, without preamble. "It's possibly the worst idea I've ever had, but my brother has convinced me to present it anyway." Marina waited, her heart hammering. Anton took over. "Our organization has problems. Corruption we've inherited from our father's era. Operations we morally object to, but don't have the infrastructure to eliminate. Dirty cops and politicians who think we're stupid enough to let them keep bleeding us. We've wanted to clean house for years, but never trusted anyone enough to help." "You want me to help you reform a criminal organization," Marina said slowly. "From the inside. We want you to prove your loyalty by helping us become the kind of criminals you can live with." Artem corrected. "Better angels, if such things exist in our world. Use the intelligence you gathered. Show us where the rot is. Help us cut it out. Then maybe, possibly, we can discuss what comes after. And if I refuse, then I keep my original promise. I'll ruin you for betraying me. Quick or slow, but complete." Artem's expression didn't change. "Choose, Marina. Redemption through service or destruction. You have 60 seconds. Marina looked between them, Artem's cold challenge and Anton's desperate hope, and understood this was her last chance. Work with them to change what they were, or die for failing to destroy them. Objectively, it was an impossible choice. Morally, it was compromise of the worst kind. But Marina thought of her father, who'd spent his life trying to make the world marginally better by fighting crime from inside a broken system. She thought of the evidence she'd destroyed, the career she'd sacrificed, the love she felt for two men who represented everything she was supposed to oppose. "I'll help you," she said, "on one condition. When we're done cleaning your house, we talk about what you could become. Not just better criminals, but something actually legal, actually good. I want to believe that's possible." "Hope," Anton said, with a shaky laugh. "She's choosing hope. God, I love her." Even Artem's expression softened slightly. "Then we have an accord. Welcome to the extremely complicated future, Marina Volkov. Try not to betray us again. I don't think any of us would survive it." He extended his hand. Marina shook it, then Anton's, and felt the weight of an impossible decision settle over her shoulders. She'd chosen neither her mission nor simple destruction, but something far more dangerous, the faint possibility of transformation. Outside the safe house, snow was falling again, covering the city's crimes in temporary white. Inside, Marina sat between the two men who'd become far more than targets, and wondered if redemption was actually possible, or if she'd just chosen a more elaborate form of damnation. Time would tell, but for now, she was alive, and she was choosing hope. Even if hope was the most dangerous choice of all. The war began at 3 a.m. with a phone call that shattered Marina's uneasy sleep. "We have a problem." Artem's voice was crisp despite the hour. "Get dressed. Car in 10 minutes." Marina rolled out of bed in the guest room of the twins' fortified residence. Her third location, in as many weeks as they juggled the complicated question of where she belonged in their world. She dressed quickly in tactical clothing that had become her new normal, checked the weapon she now carried constantly, and met Artem in the foyer exactly 9 minutes later. "What's happening?" she asked, noting the tension in his shoulders that suggested something catastrophic. Director Petrov made his move. He's convinced a federal prosecutor to issue warrants based on the evidence he claims you've been feeding him. The story he's selling is that you've been deep undercover, maintaining your cover so thoroughly that you've missed check-ins, and he's moving forward with what he has. Marina's stomach dropped. But I destroyed everything. He has nothing concrete. He has enough to freeze our assets, raid our properties, and arrest anyone associated with the organization. The warrants are being executed at dawn. Artem's jaw tightened. He's betting that the chaos will shake loose additional evidence or informants willing to talk. I can reach out to him. Explain that I've been compromised, that the mission has failed. Too late for that. He's already sent extraction teams to your old apartment, your known contacts, everywhere you might be. He thinks we've killed you or turned you. And either way, he's committed to bringing us down. Artem paused. There's more. He's put out word in certain channels that you're a traitor, that you sold out to the organization you were supposed to infiltrate. Your career is over, Marina. Your life as an agent is done. The words landed like physical blows. Everything she'd worked for, every sacrifice she'd made before meeting the twins, incinerated by a superior who couldn't accept that his agent had made a different choice. Anton appeared from the war room, his face grim. Security teams are in position. We're moving essential personnel to the secondary locations. But Artem's right. We're about to be under full assault. Everything we've built is at risk. Marina's mind raced through options, running scenarios with the tactical training that had kept her alive this long. The corrupt operations, the ones we were planning to eliminate anyway, give them to Petrov. Both twins looked at her sharply. Explain, Artem demanded. You said you wanted to clean house. The trafficking routes your father established. The protection rackets that are more theft than protection. The politicians who are liabilities instead of assets. Petrov wants criminals? Give him criminals. Just not you. You're suggesting we sacrifice our own people, Anton said slowly. I'm suggesting we identify the parts of your organization you want gone anyway, and let the federal prosecution do the work for you. You come out looking cooperative. Petrov gets his arrests. The worst elements get purged. Everyone wins except the people who deserve to lose. Artem was already pulling up files on his tablet, his mind clearly racing ahead. It could work, but it requires precise execution. We'd need to feed Petrov information that leads him exactly where we want, without giving him anything that points back to our core operations. I can do that. I know how he thinks, how intelligence services build cases. I can create a trail that satisfies his need for a win while protecting what actually matters to you. To us, Anton corrected quietly. You're part of this now, Marina. For better or worse. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Marina worked with Artem to identify targets. Mid-level operators who'd been skimming, brutal enforcers whose violence had become counterproductive, corrupt officials who were more risk than benefit. She crafted anonymous tips that would lead Petrov's investigation in precisely choreographed directions, created digital trails that would satisfy forensic accountants, and built a narrative that would give the prosecutor enough victories to declare the operation a success. By the time federal agents began their dawn raids, the Kuznetsov organization was ready. Key personnel had disappeared into safe houses. Essential records had been scrubbed or relocated. And the targets Marina had identified found themselves swept up in a coordinated law enforcement action that hit with devastating precision. Director Petrov called Marina's encrypted phone at 7 a.m. She'd been expecting it. Marina! His voice was tight with controlled fury. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Which is more than I can say for the operation you just compromised. I compromised? You've been dark for weeks. The last intel I received suggested you were getting close to a breakthrough. Then nothing. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to trust your agent. Instead, you assumed I'd failed and launched a premature operation that's now cost you the real target. The real target? Petrov's laugh was bitter. You mean the Kuznetsov twins? Who you've clearly been compromised by. Don't insult my intelligence, Marina. I know exactly what happened. You fell for them. The accusation hung in the digital silence between them. What I fell for, Marina said carefully, is the reality that nothing is as simple as you want it to be. Yes, the Kuznetsovs are criminals. They're also human beings, operating in a system that's corrupt from street level to the highest offices. The question is whether you want to make the world marginally better or score points by taking down the most visible targets. I want justice. No, you want wins that look good in reports. Real justice would mean dismantling the entire system, including the parts you benefit from. Since that's not happening, I made a choice to work with the people who could actually change things from inside. By becoming a criminal yourself. By choosing transformation over destruction. The evidence you're processing right now, that's weeks of work identifying the worst elements in the Kuznetsov operation. The trafficking routes are shut down. The corrupt cops are exposed. The protection rackets are dissolved. You're getting more actual justice from this than you would have from indicting Artem and Anton and watching the organization dissolve into something worse under whoever took over. Petrov was silent for a long moment. You've thought this through. I've done nothing but think about it. This is the best possible outcome, given the reality of the situation. Take the win, Director. Declare the operation a success, and let me do what you trained me to do. Make things marginally better from wherever I can work. You know I have to list you as compromised. Your career with the agency is over. I know. I accepted that when I made my choice. Marina took a breath. But before you write me off completely, consider this. You now have an asset inside the Kuznetsov organization with complete access and absolute trust. If you're smart, you'll find a way to maintain that connection. Not for prosecution, but for intelligence, for change, for the actual improvement you claim to want. Another silence, longer this time. This conversation didn't happen, Petrov finally said. Officially, you're compromised and under investigation. Unofficially, I'll expect periodic updates on the Kuznetsov operations. And Marina? Don't make me regret this. I won't. The call ended, leaving Marina exhausted and uncertain but alive. She'd just negotiated a truce with her former employer, while simultaneously protecting the criminals she'd been sent to destroy. The moral complexity of it should have bothered her more than it did. Anton found her an hour later, standing at the window, watching federal agents load arrested men into vehicles on the street below. That's Victor, he said quietly, pointing to one of the arrestees. He's been stealing from us for 2 years. And there's Mikhail. He ran the trafficking routes. We've wanted them gone, but couldn't do it without starting internal wars. He turned to Marina. You just gave us permission to clean house and made it look like we were cooperating with law enforcement. That's brilliant and terrifying. That's survival. For all of us. Is it, though? Survival? Anton's voice was soft. Or are we just reshaping the cage we're stuck in? Before Marina could answer, Artem entered with his tablet showing news coverage. The prosecutor is calling this a major victory against organized crime. They're crediting months of careful investigation and an embedded asset. They're using you as their success story without naming you. Good. Let them. As long as they think I'm still their asset, we have breathing room. Breathing room for what exactly? Artem's question was sharp. What's the end game here, Marina? We've eliminated the worst elements of our organization. We've satisfied law enforcement enough to back off, but we're still criminals running a criminal empire. What's your vision for where this goes? It was the question Marina had been avoiding, the one that required her to articulate a future she wasn't sure existed. I don't have all the answers, she admitted, but I know what I want. I want you to use your power for something better than what your father built. You control resources, networks, and influence that could actually help people instead of exploiting them. Real estate development that creates affordable housing instead of money laundering fronts. Shipping operations that are actually legitimate. Restaurants and businesses that employ people fairly. You could be successful without being destructive. Sounds like you're describing going legitimate, Anton said. I'm describing evolution. You'll never be saints. But you could be businessmen who happen to have complicated pasts, instead of crime lords pretending to be businessmen. Artem studied her for a long moment. And what role do you play in this evolution, beyond being the conscience we apparently lacked? Whatever role you'll let me have. Marina met his eyes steadily. I love you. Both of you. That's not tactical or strategic, it's just true. I want to be part of your lives, your organization, your future. If you'll have me despite everything I've been and done. The twins exchanged one of their wordless communications, the kind that came from sharing a lifetime. This is insane, Artem said finally. Every rational part of me says to eliminate the threat you represent and move forward cautiously. But, Marina prompted, but my brother is in love with you, and I'm apparently in the same impossible position. And despite every reason to be cautious, I find myself wanting to believe in this future you're describing. Even if it's naive, even if it's dangerous. Anton moved closer, taking Marina's hand. We've never shared anything before. Not like this. It's going to be complicated and messy and probably disaster. But I'm willing to try if you are, if we all are. Marina looked between them. Artem's careful control warring with vulnerability, Anton's passionate hope tempered by hard-earned caution, and made a decision that should have been impossible. Then let's try. All of us. Together. The kiss that followed involved all three of them, awkward and perfect and strange. A seal on an agreement that defied conventional relationship structures and probably broke several laws besides. The next 6 months were transformation in action. Marina worked with the twins to restructure their organization, identifying legitimate opportunities and slowly shifting resources away from criminal enterprises. It wasn't redemption. Too much blood had been spilled for that. But it was progress. Artem's analytical mind found ways to make legal businesses profitable. Anton's charisma built partnerships with legitimate companies. And Marina used her intelligence background to identify threats and opportunities neither twin would have recognized. They also had to figure out how to actually live together. Then three people with complicated histories, trying to build something resembling a normal life in circumstances that were anything but normal. There were fights about territory and time and attention. There were moments of profound connection that justified every risk. There were long conversations late at night about what they were building and whether it could last. We need to make this official somehow, Anton said one evening, as they sat together in the residence they now shared. I know we can't exactly have a traditional wedding, but there should be something, some commitment that's real. What are you suggesting? Artem asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Marriage, or something like it. The three of us, making vows to each other, making this permanent. Marina's heart lurched. That's not legally possible. marriage is a contract between two people. Then we make our own rules. Anton's eyes were bright with determination. We've broken every other convention. Why not this one? Artem was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll make arrangements. The ceremony happened 3 weeks later, in the private chapel on their estate. An old priest who'd known the Kuznetsov family for generations and had learned not to ask questions about anything they did agreed to officiate. The only witnesses were the handful of people they trusted absolutely, reformed members of their organization who'd chosen to stay during the transition, and Marina's mother, who'd been told a carefully edited version of the truth and chose to accept her daughter's happiness over understanding the details. Marina wore a dress the color of midnight silk, only custom made to cover the scars from the attack that had started this whole impossible journey. Artem and Anton both wore dark suits, looking so alike and yet so different as they waited for her at the altar. The vows were unconventional, written by all three of them during late-night sessions that involved more arguing than romance, but resulted in words that actually meant something. I promise to see you clearly, Marina said, both of you, for exactly who you are. Not who I need you to be, not who the world thinks you should be. And I promise to love what I see, complicated and difficult and beautiful. I promise to protect you, Anton said, his voice thick with emotion. Not just from external threats, but from my own worst impulses. To be better, because you make me want to be better. I promise to trust you, Artem added, and those words cost him something to speak. Despite every instinct that says trust is weakness. Because you've earned it, and because I can't build a future on fear. The priest blessed their union with prayers that had blessed Kuznetsov marriages for generations, asking God to watch over them despite their sins. Rings were exchanged, all three of them wearing matching bands of white gold, engraved with words in Russian that translated to loyalty, passion, trust. Legally, the marriage documents listed Artem as Marina's husband, but the vows spoken in that chapel bound all three of them in ways that transcended legal recognition. The reception was small and intimate, just their inner circle celebrating in the residence ballroom. Marina danced with Artem first, his movements precise and controlled even in waltz. Then Anton swept her into something more energetic that made her laugh. Then, in a moment that would have scandalized traditional society, both twins danced with her simultaneously, the three of them moving together in a way that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. No regrets, Anton whispered during a quiet moment. Marina looked around the room, at the people who'd become family, at the organization transforming from criminal empire to legitimate business, at the two men who'd become her entire world. None, she said firmly. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Marina officially became part of the Kuznetsov business operations, using her intelligence expertise to handle security and risk assessment. Artem focused on strategy and expansion. Anton managed partnerships and public relations. Together, they transformed the organization bit by bit. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and compromises. Some parts of their empire couldn't be made completely clean. Too many people dependent on income that couldn't be easily legitimized. But they shifted the balance, reduced the harm, and built something they could defend morally, if not legally. Director Petrov received quarterly reports from Marina, heavily edited, but containing enough genuine intelligence to maintain the fiction that she was still an asset. In return, he provided early warnings about law enforcement actions and political shifts that affected their operations. an uneasy alliance built on mutual benefit rather than trust. Marina's mother visited occasionally, still not fully understanding her daughter's life, but loving her anyway. Anton's charm eventually won her over, and even Artem's reserved nature couldn't resist her motherly instincts to feed people too much and worry about their happiness. 2 years after the wedding, Marina discovered she was pregnant. The news landed like a bomb in the war room, where all 3 of them were reviewing quarterly reports. She'd taken the test that morning, stared at the positive result for 20 minutes, and then decided the only way forward was direct honesty. "I'm pregnant," she said, interrupting Artem's analysis of shipping routes. Both twins froze. "You're—" Anton couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "Pregnant. Yes, about 6 weeks. Do you know which—" Artem trailed off, the question hanging unfinished. Marina shook her head. "Not yet. Does it matter?" Silence as both men processed this. Then Anton started laughing, a sound of pure joy that lit up his entire face. "We're having a baby. All of us. God, that's terrifying and amazing and completely insane." "Yes, to all of that." Marina's hand went instinctively to her still flat stomach. "I know this complicates everything. Our arrangement, our business, our security. But I'm keeping the baby, and I want both of you to be fathers. Real fathers. However we make that work." Artem stood slowly, moved to where Marina sat, and knelt beside her chair. "I've done terrible things in my life. Hurt people, broken laws, built an empire on moral compromises. But this, you, Anton, now this child, this feels like a chance at something good, something worth protecting." He kissed her gently, and Anton joined them, wrapping his arms around both of them, in an embrace that felt like safety and promise and hope all tangled together. "We're going to need a bigger house," Anton said eventually, "and better security, and maybe a complete lifestyle overhaul." "One thing at a time," Marina said, though she was already mentally cataloging everything that would need to change. The pregnancy progressed without complications. Marina worked until the day before she went into labor, refusing to be sidelined, despite Anton's protests and Artem's concerned hovering. When contractions started at 2 in the morning, both twins accompanied her to the private hospital they'd arranged, and both held her hands through 20 hours of labor. The baby was a girl, born screaming with a full head of dark hair and her father's eyes. They named her Elena, son after Anton and Artem's mother, who died young trying to escape their father's violence. Genetically, the paternity test showed she was Artem's, but both twins held her in those first hours with the same reverence, the same fierce protectiveness. She was theirs, all 3 of them, in the only way that mattered. Marina watched Anton sing Russian lullabies to his daughter, while Artem planned security protocols to keep her safe, and understood that they'd built something genuinely valuable from the wreckage of their various betrayals and impossible choices. 5 years later, Elena started kindergarten at an elite private school, blissfully unaware that her family was unusual. She called both men Papa, differentiating them as Papa Artem and Papa Anton. She inherited Artem's analytical mind and Anton's fearless charm, and she had Marina completely wrapped around her tiny fingers. The Kuznetsov business empire was now 80% legitimate, with the remaining 20% existing in legal gray areas that the family was actively working to eliminate. Artem had become a respected businessman, his criminal past acknowledged but overshadowed by his current success. Anton ran a charitable foundation that actually helped people, using his networks to solve problems that traditional charities couldn't touch. And Marina had found her purpose in the most unexpected place. She ran security and risk assessment for the organization, but she also mentored young women from difficult backgrounds, helping them find paths forward that didn't require compromising their principles or their safety. So she'd become exactly what she'd accused Petrov of not being. Someone actually making the world marginally better from inside a complicated system. On their 7th anniversary, the three of them stood on the balcony of their home overlooking the city that had witnessed their transformation. "Do you ever regret it?" Artem asked quietly. "Giving up your career, your principles, everything you believed in?" Marina considered the question seriously. "I gave up one version of my principles, but I found something more important. Actual change instead of symbolic victories. I'm not a saint. Neither are either of you. But we're better than we were. And that matters." "The spy who fell in love with her targets," Anton said with a smile. "Sounds like a terrible movie." "Or a beautiful story," Marina countered. "Depends on how you tell it." Below them, the city lights flickered in the darkness, crime and commerce and life continuing its complicated dance. Somewhere in that maze, Director Petrov was reading Marina's latest report, making decisions about how to use the intelligence she provided. In another part of the city, federal prosecutors were closing cases built on evidence she'd helped provide, never knowing that their greatest asset had chosen a different kind of justice. And in this moment, on this balcony, three people who should never have worked as a family stood together in the quiet certainty that they'd found something worth every sacrifice and risk. Artem took Marina's left hand, Anton took her right, and together, they stood in silence, watching their city and thinking about the daughter sleeping safely upstairs, and the organization they'd transformed, and the future they'd built from betrayal and second chances. "No more secrets," Artem murmured. The threat he'd once made transformed into a promise. "No more lies," Anton added. "Just this," Marina finished. "Whatever this is, however long it lasts." In the end, it lasted because they chose it to last. Because they protected it fiercely and worked for it constantly and refused to let the world's judgment determine their worth. Because love, in all its complicated and unconventional forms, was stronger than the rules that said it shouldn't exist. The Mafia twin who'd once threatened to ruin her for betrayal had instead learned to trust. The spy who'd been sent to destroy them had instead chosen transformation. And together, all three of them had built something that defied simple categorization, but felt profoundly real. Not redemption exactly, not absolution, but maybe something better. The messy, imperfect, beautiful work of becoming marginally better people in an imperfect world. And that, Marina thought, as she stood between the two men she loved under the stars they'd fought so hard to reach, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Did this story capture your imagination? Want more morally complex romance with powerful characters making impossible choices? Follow for more stories that explore the gray areas between right and wrong, where love transforms even the most unlikely souls. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next tale of passion, betrayal, and redemption. Which part of Marina, Artem, Son, and Anton's journey resonated most with you? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your feedback shapes the stories I tell. Until next time, remember, the most interesting stories happen in the spaces between black and white, where real people make complicated choices and love finds a way despite impossible odds.